Violence against humans and girls is one of the world's most prevalent human rights violations, taking place every day, many times over, in every corner of the globe. Today, we're going to talk about the different types of it, its short and long term consequences on the victims, and also about what the government and the people can do to help. Let's start with the definition. The United Nations defines violence against humans as an act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm, or suffering to humans, including threats of such actions, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. So, it's not limited to physical, sexual, and physical violence occurring in the family or within to the general community. Violence against humans can be manifested through a lot of different kinds of actions that sometimes aren't decided. Domestic violence, also called domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, is any partner of behavior that uses to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. This is one of the most common forms of violence by humans globally. Domestic violence can include 1. Economic violence. Economic violence involves making or attempting to make a person financially dependent by maintaining total control over finances, resources, withholding access to money, and or forbidding attendance at school or employment. 2. Patrimonial violence. Control, retain, or take someone's money, cause damage to other personal objects on purpose. Retain partners' personal objects, personal documents, or work documents from her. 3. Physiological violence. Physiological violence involves causing fear by intimidation, threatening physical harm to self, partner, or children, destruction of pets and property, mind games, or forced isolation from friends, family, school, and or work. 4. Emotional violence. Emotional violence includes undermining a person's sense of self-worth through constant criticism, belittling one's abilities, name-calling, or other verbal abuse, damaging a partner's relationships with the children, or letting a partner see friends and family. Number 4. Physical violence. Physical violence involves hurting or trying to hurt a partner by hitting, kicking, burning, grabbing, pitching, shoving, slapping, hair pulling, beetling, denying medical care, or forcing alcohol and or drug use, or using our physical force. It may include property damage.
Sexual violence. Sexual violence is any sexual act committed against the will of another person, either when this person does not give consent or when consent cannot be given because the person is a child, has a mental disability, or is severely intoxicated or unconscious as a result of alcohol or drugs. Sexual violence can include the following: sexual harassment. Sexual harassment encompasses non-consensual physical contact like grabbing, pitching, slapping, or rubbing against another person in a sexual way. It also includes non-physical forms such as catcalls, sexual comments about a person's body or appearance, demands for sexual favors, sexually suggestive staring, stalking, and exposing on sex organs. Rape. Rape culture is the social environment that allows sexual violence to be normalized and justified. It is rooted in patriarchy and fueled by persistent gender inequalities and biases about gender and sexuality. Rape is any non-consensual vaginal, anal, or oral penetration of another person with any bodily part or object. This can be by any person, known or unknown to the survivor. within marriage and relationships and during armed conflicts. Corrective rape. Corrective rape is a form of rape of perpetrated against someone on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Is It is intended to force the victim to conform to heterosexuality or normative gender identity.
According to the 2015 balance of the League 180 toll-free line, 76,651 reports of violence were registered, being 38,451 reports of physical violence, 23,247 reports of psychological violence, 5,556 reports of moral violence, 3,961 reports of home imprisonment, 3,478 reports of sexual violence, 1,607 reports of patrimonial violence, and 351 reports of people trafficking. Now let's learn about a definition of these different kinds. In 2015, the government released a study that showed that every 7 minutes, a woman was victim of domestic violence in Brazil. Over 70% of the Brazilian female population will suffer from some kind of violence throughout their lifetime. And 1 in every 4 women reports being a victim of psychological or physical violence. In 2017, Brazil had an estimate of 606 cases of violence and 164 cases of rape per day, over 60,000 cases throughout the year. It is also estimated that only 10% of the cases are registered to the police. Although Brazil acknowledged that domestic violence was a problem since the 1940s, the government has only acted upon it from 1980s onwards, with the creation of the women police stations, and later in 26 with the publication of the domestic violence law.
Now, let's explore the scope of the problem. Violence against women has several reasons and has been occurring for a long time based on the sexist culture that present itself in humanity. Analysis of prevalence data from 2000 to 2010 across 161 countries and areas conducted by WHO found that worldwide nearly in 1 in 3 or 30% of women have been subjected to physical and sexual violence by an intimate partner or non-partner sexual violence or both. The pandemic of violence against women is not new. Even before COVID-19 hits us globally, 2,043 million women and girls were abused by their intimate partners in past years. The COVID-19 pandemic and its social and economic impacts intensifies the violence because of the lockdowns, even as support services faltered and accessing helping became harder. Intimate partner and sexual violence is the result of factors occurring at individual, family, community, and wider society levels that interact with each other to increase or reduce risks. Protective. Some are associated with being perpetrator of violence. Some are associated with experiencing violence, and some are associated with both. Risk factors for both intimate partners and sexual violence include lower levels of education, a history of exposure to child maltreatment, witnessing family violence, antisocial personality disorder, harmful use of alcohol, harmful masculine behaviors including have multiple partners or attitudes that condone violence, low level of gender equality, and the factors especially associated with intimate partners are past history of exposure to violence, marital, marital discord and dissatisfaction, male controlling behaviors toward their partners, and the factors especially associated with sexual violence penetration include beliefs in family honor and sexual purity, ideologies of male sexual entitlement, and weak legal sanctions for sexual violence.
There are a lot of impacts generated by domestic violence against women, beginning with health consequences. Intimate partners, physical, sexual, and psychological violence causes serious short and long-term physical, mental, sexual, and reproductive health problems for women. This also affects their children's health and well-being, and this violence can lead to a high social and economic costs for women, their families, and society. Such violence can lead to unintended pregnancies, induced abortions, gynecological problems, and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. Intimate partner violence also increases the probability of miscarriage, stillbirth, preterm delivery, and low birth weight babies. These forms of violence can lead to depression, post-traumatic stress, anxiety disorders, sleeping problems, eating disorders, and suicide or homicide attempts. The 2013 analysis by the magazine Who's found out that women that have suffered from the intimate partner violence were almost twice as likely to experience depression and problem drinking. Health effects can also include headaches, pain syndromes, gastrointestinal disorders, limited mobility, and poor overall health. Sexual violence, particularly during childhood, can lead to increased smoke and substance use and risky sexual behaviors. It is also associated with perpetration of violence for males and being a victim of violence for females. And there are social and economic costs of the intimate partner and sexual violence against women that have a lot of effects for all society. Women may suffer isolation, inability to work, low of wages, lack participation in regular activities, and limited ability to care for themselves and their children.
Public policies implemented in Brazil to ensure violated women. The National Pact to Combat Violence Against Women was launched in August 2007 as part of the Brazilian federal government social agenda. It consists of a federative agreement between the federal government, the governments of the Brazilian states, and municipalities for the planning of actions that consolidate the national policy for confronting violence against women through the implementation of integrated public policies throughout the national territory, in the sense guaranteeing the prevention of and combating violence and guaranteeing the rights of Brazilian women. Thus, it was understood the need for maintenance, expansion, and strengthening of this proposal, placing as the main actions: 1. Guarantee of the applicability of the Maria da Penha law. 2. Expansion and strengthening of the service network for women in situations of violence. 3. Guarantee of citizen security and access to justice. 4. Guarantee of sexual and reproductive rights, combating sexual exploitation and trafficking in women. And 5. Guarantee the autonomy of women in situations of violence and expanding their rights.
So now, let's learn how we can help end the violence against women every day. 1. Listen to and believe survivors. When a woman shares her story of violence, she takes the first step to breaking the cycle of abuse. It is on all of us to give her the safe space she needs to speak up and be heard. It's important to remember that when discussing cases of sexual violence, a victim's sobriety, clothes, and sexuality are irrelevant. It's always, it's always the perpetrator's responsibility. So, when a survivor is telling her story, don't say, "Why didn't she just leave?" Just say, "We hear you, we believe you, and we stand with you." 2. Teach the next generation and learn from them. The examples we set for the younger generation shape the way they think about gender, respect, and human rights. Start conversations about gender roles early on and challenge the traditional features and characteristics assigned to men and women. Point out the stereotypes that children constantly encounter, whether in the media, on the street, or at the school, and let them know that it's okay to be different. Encourage a culture of acceptance by empowering young advocates with information and educating them about women's rights. We can build a better future for all. Another way we can help is understanding consent. Freely given, enthusiastic consent is mandatory every time. A no is always a no. Phrases like "she was asking for it" or "boys will be boys" attempt to blur the lines around sexual consent, place the blame on victims, and excusing perpetrators from the crimes they have committed.
Now, moving to the fourth topic. If you are concerned about a friend who may be experiencing violence or feels unsafe around someone, let's learn how we can help them find safety and support. If you are worried about a friend's safety, stay in touch and be creative. Avoid making the abuser suspicious so that communication lines can stay open. For example, you can create secret code words to use in conversations that can help you communicate more safely. Be supportive and believe them. Reassure them that they are not alone and that help and support are available. Recognize that it may be difficult for them to talk about the abuse, but if they want to talk about it, you gotta listen carefully. Help them think through how to stay safe during COVID-19. Help your friend create a plan for lockdown situations. Check if there are other friends or family that they could stay with during this time. Consider helping them to reach out to these people to make a plan. But if you think someone is abusing you, you gotta know help is available. You are not alone. Let's check some of the signs of abuse so you can recognize a toxic and violent relationship and be able to protect yourself and get out of the situation safely. Check if your partner insists that you reply right away to their texts, email, and calls, and demands to know your passwords to social media sites, email, and other accounts. You also gotta know that an abusive partner may act jealous, including constantly accusing you of cheating. They may attempt to control how you spend money and your use of medications or birth control. They may make everyday decisions for you, such as what you wear, what you eat. And don't forget that an abusive partner may threaten to turn you into authorities for illegal activity if you try to report the abuse or if you resist. As we can see, everybody can help some way. Let's end this together and protect our women and girls from this harmful situation of violence.
The milkman, the paperboy, evening TV. Did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me, please. This whole world confusing me. Clouds as mean as you ever seen. Ain't a bird who knows you're true. Then a little voice inside you whispers.